Hello everyone, hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Long from Be So Inspired, and today we're going to learn about how to stuff doll limbs. So it might seem like it's more difficult than it actually is. So we're going to walk through a few of the steps. But before we get down and actually show you how to do it, we're going to talk about a few of the things that you might want to have or you might need. Might make your job a little easier. So for me, my number one go-to tool for doll making is called a hemostat. So it's actually a medical tool that they use in like an OR, an operating room, but it comes in lots of different sizes, and you can get lighter versions of them that aren't necessarily a medical grade from different either medical supply shops or like even Amazon and things like that. So you just have to sort of like Google search where you can get them. And they come in lots of different sizes. So I'll be showing you here different sizes, but as you can see, they come in lots of different sizes. So great if you're, depending on what size of doll you're making, how long the limbs are, you might want a bigger size or a smaller size. Obviously the smaller is less heavy and a lot easier to handle, but if you've got like an 18-inch doll that you're stuffing long legs, it won't be long enough if you use a smaller one. So a couple of wonderful things about them is that they have a very blunt edge on the top. So they are also great not just for turning, but for like pushing out seams. So that is wonderful. So it's not like a scissor where it would be so pokey. It's got a nice blunt edge on it. It does have a little bit of teeth. I don't know if you can see those or not. It does have some teeth so it can grip here and just really hold so it doesn't slide through and tear your fabric. And then it also has a locking mechanism right at the end here, so you can listen that it clicks stop locked and it stops. So the more you squeeze, the more locked it'll get. And then just to unlock it, you kind of squeeze it and then pull one of them just back slightly, and then they come undone. So you can just do that all with one hand to lock it and then unlock it again. So if you don't have hemostats or don't want to invest in a pair, you can use a knitting needles. So there's tons of different lengths of knitting needles, and obviously the wider ones will be easier. You can get it chopsticks, or you can have like a little point turner like this is also great for doing the tiny little pieces. So just something that's longer than your fingers that you can use to sort of help turn would be the most ideal. And then you need a pair of really pointy, sharp scissors that you're just going to use like the first quarter inch of really. And so they just need to be really sharp and pointy so that you can make little snips in them. And whatever you feel comfortable using that you know you can rely on and that are nice and sharp. And I'm going to show you how we use all of these tools right away to make nice, stiff doll legs that are also floppy. So the beautiful thing about modern rag dolls is that they have limbs that are movable on them, but that doesn't mean that their limbs have to be droopy either. So we're going to talk about how much to fill with stuffing. Also, what kind of stuffing to be using will determine that. Today we just have a polyester fiber fill. It's the most common stuffing. You can get it at craft stores. It's the cheapest. It has a really high loft, and a high loft means that there's lots of air in the stuffing. So if you put this in your doll like this, like probably this amount could be for one leg because it really compacts. So as you see, I can get all of this stuffing into my hands, like well into my hands. So if you want a doll that really holds her shape or his shape, that you will have to use a lot of this stuffing. So you can kind of outweigh that if this is maybe a cheaper stuffing, but if you have to use a lot opposed to a more dense stuffing that you have to use a little bit less of, but it all depends, it's personal preference. But one of the biggest things is just knowing how to stuff up any kind of stuffing so it doesn't end up clumpy. You get into all of the edges, and we'll give you some tips and tricks here today. So let's get started. Okay, so here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about different shapes to start. So there are lots of different shapes of doll limbs. Some are curved, some are straight. These are two basic straight shapes. They have an angle here for the arm, but if they're a leg, then they won't. This one has a rounded edge here, and this one has a thumb. So we're going to stuff the rounded edge first, as it's going to be much easier, and then we're going to talk about stuffing the thumb. But before we do that, we need to turn them all right side out. So as you can see, I've already been working here, and I've turned a lot of my limbs right side out. I've got my stuffed pile of limbs over here. and I just have one left to turn. So here's my limb. I've done a triple stitch and I've shortened the stitch length. It's really, really important to have a strong seam allowance, a strong seam on your seam allowance so that when you're forcefully pushing all of this stuffing in, especially if you like sort of nice stiff limbs, that it will support that and it won't tear apart, especially for safety. So now all you need to do is take your favorite sharp scissors and make some snips all the way along. This is a straight area here too, but I still just make them along here. You need to be careful not to go so close to the seam that you are going to cut your stitches, but close enough that it's going to make a nice smooth edge. So if you turn your limb around and you notice that it seems really flat maybe at the tip, it's quite possibly because you haven't put enough snips into this curved area. So just make sure that you put enough here and it'll give you some grace. In this thumb, you're actually going to try and cut away a little bit of a triangle here, and so that it goes right down deep into the thumb. And again, you can just make a tiny snip a little closer, but not cutting into any of your stitches. And then continue around, all the way around. Yeah. And when it's straight, you can stop, but I just like to keep going. I make them a little bit more spaced out, but I like to keep going there. Good. Now I'm going to use my hemostats to turn this around, but you would do the same thing with a flat or one with a thumb, or if it's a curved arm piece too. So I have them closed right now, and I'm going to put them inside. So it's really easy to put them inside when they're closed, and again, they've got a nice blunt edge. So I put them all the way inside. Then I unlock them and open them up, and I make sure that I get the seam that's nice and strong here. So that seam is nice and strong, it's triple stitched. I push that seam into the tip of the hemostats, and then I lock them. So they're locked now with that inside. And all I have to do, because it's holding it enough of it strong, is I just pull, and it pulls it nicely out. So it pulls it nicely out for me, but that is not your hand with the thumb. And even if it was a circle shape, you still need to sort of smooth out that section. So then I close it and I keep it locked so it doesn't catch on anything. And I push these back inside, and I just use the tip and I work my way around it. So if it was a round limb, then it would just look like this, and I would work my way around it. And sometimes I even open it up so that the seam is open enough. I open it up just to sort of stretch and sort of open up that seam, and it's ready to stuff. But because this has a thumb, you're going to do the same thing, a little more careful for the thumb. So I'm just going to use that tip, not push hard, but just gently. I'm supporting the fabric here, and I'm just gently pushing in my hemostats in there until it makes that nice thumb shape. And because I clipped, you've got that nice round edge the whole way. And look at that wonderful hand. It's just darling. Yes, and it turned out perfectly. So now we're going to stuff the rounded first, and then we're going to stuff the thumb. So I'll take some stuffing out over here, and we're going to need a lot more than that for this little arm. So I'm going to pull some stuffing apart. I always pull it apart, and I sort of give it a nice even loft first, and then I push it in my hemostats and I clip this together. So far I've been doing everything with these on my hand, and I just get into a nice rhythm here, and I push this in all the way. Then I open up my hemostats again, grab the end of the stuffing and close them, and I push. And I'm going to release and push and release and push until I really work the edges. So just like we were pushing the edges out here, now I can push even a little bit harder and work the edges because I have the stuffing. So it's not like it's the metal pushing right against the seam. It's the metal of the hemostats pushing against the stuffing, which is pushing against the seam. So I'm going to make sure that I get my nice curve there on all of the seams. And then I'll take a little bit more stuffing. Again, I always just give it a little bit of extra pull apart and loft, and you can kind of check for it as well. Make sure that there's nothing that accidentally appeared in there or anything. And I keep open and close, and I keep pushing it in a nice, so all that stuffing that I've pushed in is only about up to here now, and it's nice and firm. So a rule of thumb, I'm just going to cut some of these threads off here. A rule of thumb is that you want the end of your limb to be stuffed the hardest. So you want this, like the hand or the toes, to be stuffed the hardest. And then you can slowly decrease the amount of stuffing you put in if you don't want a very hard limb. So if you're going to make a knee, then you stuff up to the knee and sew the knee, or the elbow, but you just keep pulling it apart, and then you can stuff a little bit less if you want to here, or you can keep the same stiffness. And then if it seems like it's just not quite joining there, then I kind of just press and work it with my top hand around as I'm pushing with the hemostats. Good. And take a little bit more here again. Now, how far up to stuff? This is also a common error, and it's very dependent on what you want for your style. But traditionally, a rag doll has floppy and movable arms, and I'm going to show you just why here. I'll just get this pushed in. All right. So, okay, I'm going to take my giraffe, and I'll just take her dress off here for you, so you can see her arm. So as you can see her arm, it's very, very movable here. If it was stuffed right to the very end, it would be sticking out of her really straight and not movable. But you can see there's not much stuffing inside the shoulder here, right here. And so the arm moves nicely, but the rest of her arm is quite firm, and it's especially firm right here on the tip. So that is like the ideal modern rag doll stuffing of this arm. And how you achieve that is by you stuff really hard here. It's getting a little bit less as we go along. And then I have stopped stuffing. I might add just a touch more on the tip here. I have stopped stuffing a good fingertip or a good ½ an inch away from the seam, because your seam is going to be at minimum a ¼ inch here. And then you want to be able to have some movement here. And this just to maybe relax a little bit in here as well. So also know that if you've been stuffing this really loose, then if you have an opening here, then it is going to relax a little bit. But this is going to give us plenty of space. That's nice and flat. As you can see here, it's nice and flat. I can fold it over to catch this in the seam of our doll, and then it'll be able to move, and then you can just even work it back up into the shoulder if you need to at that point. So that is how you stuff just a basic arm. To get the thumb is a little bit different. Now, there's two ways to do this, but the typical way is that you're going to do stuff, again, the tip of the hand here. You're going to just use a little bit of stuffing and really push and get this nice and rounded. Stuff up to about, it's just like filling a cavity with water, right? You fill up to the top part of the hand, and then you're going to fill the thumb. So you want to do all the extremities first, and then move a little bit further out. So we're going to take this, I'm going to separate it. I don't want a lot because I just want to use it for my hand, the tip of my fingers on my hand, and I'm going to push this in. And I'm going to, like I said before, really use the hemostats and the stuffing to work the seam so that there's no like open areas, and the whole top of the hand is stuffed. Pull it open, and I'm going to grab a tiny bit more, so not a lot because that's a tiny little thumb, and I'm going to work it into the thumb next. So we don't want a thumb that has no stuffing in it. We're going to push this into the thumb, and it's nice and filled. Good. And it's going to maybe want to bounce back, so you can give it a little bit of a hold while you grab a bit more stuffing just to fill in the rest of the hand. Good. And then the rest of the process is the same. So then you'll just continue to fill in the rest of the hand or the rest of the arm, and then leave it up a ½ an inch at the end. So I hope that you learned a little bit more about some tools. If you are using a knitting needle for this, you can do the same kind of a thing. It's just, it doesn't grab. So it just takes a little bit longer to sort of push it in, but you use the same idea. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned some tips about stuffing doll limbs. It's a wonderful way, a wonderful thing that you can do. Have all your prepared doll limbs ready to go already, and you can just take these with you, to the beach even, or sitting on the deck or watching TV at night. Take your hemostats and a bag of stuffing, and you can be stuffing doll legs on the go, even in the vehicle if you're not driving. And it's just a wonderful use of time, and it's a relaxing thing to do also. So I hope you learned some new tips and tricks for stuffing doll legs. I'd love to hear in the comments. If you like this video, please do like it and subscribe to the Be So Inspired YouTube channel. It would be wonderful. Come on over to the Be So Inspired website and make sure you sign up for our free newsletter, because we're giving lots of tips and tricks away all the time, tutorials, all the fun things about dolls and quilts. And if you are on Facebook, please do join us at the Be So Inspired Facebook group. Thank you so much, and happy that you are here. Have a wonderful day.